Creating an HDR image can be done in some of the newer cameras directly in camera, but when you do it in Photoshop, you have a lot more control over what you're going to get. And I'm going to show you what you can actually do. So to do an HDR image, you need a set of 5 images that are shot at different exposures. So what that means is that in this bright image, you have detail down at the bottom here, which in the darker image is not there. And in the darker image, you have detail up in the sky that in the brighter image is washed out. So when you have a set of 5 images like this, then you need to go to an application called Bridge. So it is in your graphics photo and graphics folder here called Bridge. So we're going to open that up, and in Bridge you're going to navigate to where your images are, and I've clicked on my first one, and I'm going to scroll through the 5 images. I'm going to hold Shift and click on the last one, so I have all 5 selected. Then I can go into Tools, Photoshop, Merge to HDR Pro. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the 5 images, it's going to open them all up, it's going to do some calculations, and it's going to merge them all into one Photoshop image and give you the dialog box for HDR Pro. So this looks a little bit like this. So I have my 5 images. If for some reason you have some strange shadow edges, it means that one of the images might have moved slightly, and then you can exclude it from your selection here. But all of mine look okay, so I'm going to start here. Now where you want to start is you want to start with your curve dialog. And you notice how in the curve, the most information is here in the middle and the least is on the side. So what you can do is you can take a point on that curve and draw it up a little bit so it matches the shape of this curve a little bit more and drops off. What that does, it brings out the midtones of the image. You got to be careful though, you don't go overboard or you get some very strange results. So you want to play and keep it modest, and it's just a slight adjustment here. Then you can go back to your color tab. Now you want to work from the bottom up because the top changes are the most drastic. So you want to start at the bottom so you can see where the changes are. So I'm going to bring the saturation up, which makes the colors more vivid. And same with the vibrance. I'm going to bring that up a little bit. The highlights, I'm going to bring in more highlights. I'm going to drop the shadows, so I have darker shadows. I'm going to bring the detail up because that's one of the things I really like about HDR photos. And there really isn't a right or wrong. I mean, you can go overboard with some of the things. So it really depends what you're trying to go for in your image. So I'm just going to go somewhat up. The exposure, I'm going to move it slightly brighter. The gamma is how the colors change, and you can see how the blue has gotten pretty vivid up here. And then one extra feature of HDR is the outer glow. So I can get this outer glow of my edges, and I can choose the strength of that and the radius of it, meaning how big it is. Now you can see how it has this blue glow around my edges, and that's typical for HDR. So I'm going to go with that. So once I'm happy with these adjustments, I can click on OK. And what it's going to do, it's going to merge that file together and bring it open in Photoshop, and you can see where I started, and it'll update the image, and that's see where I've gone. Now what you want to do with this image, you want to save it as a TIFF. So you go File, Save As, and save it as a TIFF. So where it says Photoshop, you go down at the bottom is the option of TIFF, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. And just for my own sake, I'm going to call this ZZZ HDR so I can find it easily. I'm going to click Save and OK. So now I can minimize Photoshop here and go back to Bridge. And because I called it ZZZ, it should be at the bottom. If I go down the list, there it is. So I'm going to go to my image. Then I can right click on the image and say Open in Camera Raw. And when I do that, I get it into yet another little dialog box. And Camera Raw is meant for images that are taken in digital cameras with a lot more information than you'd get in a JPEG. So again, you can play around with color saturation here. You can play with vibrance. You can play with the clarity. You can play with the contrast of the image. And each one of these will adjust your image, and you can see how it will make your changes. I can bring the blacks up and fill light. So all kinds of stuff you can play around with. And there is no right or wrong. You just want to say what you are trying to go for, right? So this is almost like a painted oil painting of an image, and I can play around with the color tints of this. So I could take it all the way into the purples here, and I can change the temperature, so I can get some really different changes. The cool thing about it is you can make a change here and click on Done, and once you've clicked on Done, you've got that image changed. And it remembers the changes. So I'm going to go back to that and go back to Open in Camera Raw, and it's back to with all the settings. Or I can click on Open Image, and it will actually open it up in Photoshop. And if I say Update, it will change this TIFF image that we have here to the new adjustments that I've made. So once I've got all these settings changed, I can save this, and I could go back and I could then do another version of the same image with different adjustments. And that's all there is to HDR.